the focus on this first part is to just sort of pick out the pieces of a study so that we can then, do some analysis of it. But we need to understand sort of what the different parts represent. So obviously, when we start looking at a study, the first thing we really want to focus on is what is the purpose, that goal of the study? Why are they doing what they're doing? What do they want to learn from it? And then along with that, with the goal, you sort of sometimes focus on what is known as the population. The population is the large group entirety that we're trying to make conclusions about. Like, who do we want to know about in doing this study? And so over here, I have a study that was done by the Siena College Research Institute back about a year ago. And, the headlines of these types of articles often focus on some of the conclusions. So the headline of this article was 84% say Americans being afraid to exercise freedom of speech is a serious problem. So we can sort of look through here. This was a poll, and it was looking at sort of analyzing free speech in America. And, you could go through and sort of look, but I tend to sort of look at the bullet points and some of the conclusions, sort of figuring out, like, why are you doing this? And you can even read in the first paragraph, 84% of Americans say that some Americans not exercising their freedom of speech in everyday situations due to fear of retaliation or harsh criticism is either very or somewhat a serious problem. And so if I were looking at what is the goal and what do these people want to learn in doing this poll, is they sort of want to understand sort of, they want to learn more about sort of people's feelings about freedom of speech and how free they feel to speak freely. So I'm going to sort of phrase that as they want to understand people's attitudes and feelings about free speech in America. And now, since this is a study that focuses on America and freedom of speech in America, we can use that sort of to help with the population. Now, when I was describing a population, there's a few different ways to go about it. If you can't sort of clearly tell from the article, sort of from the intro, you could also sort of generalize this from the sample. And we're going to look at the sample next and sort of talk about how we can use it to help figure out the population. But in this particular case, I know for sure I'm focused on, Americans. But I'm not really certain about what types of Americans we're looking at. So for now, I'm just going to write Americans, and then I might add to it. Because there are lots of types of Americans. There's adults, there's kids, there's different ethnicities, there's different genders. So we want to sort of maybe get this a little more precise, but I can't really do that from just sort of the overview that I'm seeing here. All right, so then it says, so the next sort of thing, once you sort of talk about what is the purpose of the study and who are we studying, we then want to figure out a sample. The sample is the people who you actually perform the study on. So they're the sort of group of the population that you actually get your data from. And there are different ways to create a sample. Now, just so you know, if we use a variable for sample, we typically use n. N gives us this, what we call the sample size often when we do things like this. And so when we look at different ways to pick out our samples, so sometimes there's just simple random, where that people are just chosen by chance, luck of the draw. Systematic means that people had sort of a method behind doing their sample. Good studies are often going to use this sort of method because they're going to want to model the sample that they're studying as close to the actual population as possible when it comes to breakdowns of gender, ethnicity, socioeconomics, like all of those sort of subgroups, they're going to want to sort of make it match whatever the overarching population they're studying is. Convenience are going to be ones like if you've ever seen like Twitter polls or, if someone's at the door somewhere giving like a survey, it's just sort of whoever was there and responded. They're not necessarily good studies that you want to base a lot of conclusions off of, but, it's convenient. And then stratified is when you make conclusions within those subgroups that you're studying. So often the systematic and the stratified are going to sort of go hand in hand together. So it's not like you do one or the other of these. You often might sort of pull from multiple ones. So if I'm looking here, I need to still figure out who is being studied, and I don't see anything directly on the first page. And so sometimes you have to actually go in and, they'll have a like, how did we do it button or a methods button. Here it's actually in that last paragraph. So we sort of get if it's a good study, they're going to talk to you about the methods. So the New York Times Opinions Siena College Free Speech Poll was conducted, and they said in February 2022, the telephone calls in English to 1,570 American residents 18 years of age or older. That line right there gives me my sample. So the sample should include how many people were studied, along with like specifics about maybe nationality or age, being as sort of, close to the reality as possible. So here I'm going to go over and write down my sample, which was 1,507 American residents, 18 years and older. And so I'm actually going to add to my population up there. It wasn't just that they were Americans. They're American adults, 18 years and older. All right, so we have our population and we have our sample.